Hey Moonies, before we get into today's episode with Jeff Trammell, I wanted to share a few things. One, by the time you're watching this, the Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon The Super Live show will have kicked off its tour. I was actually able to join the press junket with some of the cast and creative members and ask them their first memory of watching Sailor Moon. So check out our blog for their answer at SailorMoonFanClub.com. We'll also be hosting a meetup for the New York City show on Saturday, April 26th, so be out on the lookout for details on that soon. And there's also other events happening around the United States, and we'll share that in the episode description and on our social media to support our fellow Mooney event planners. And two, our anime Y2K party is happening next month. Think Butterfly Clips, Inuyasha, and Destiny's Child. Tickets are available now, and you can find the link to tickets in the podcast description as well. And if you aren't already, subscribe to our newsletter at SailorMoonFanClub.com or join our broadcast channel on Instagram to be the first to know about our upcoming events. Anyway, see you later, Moonies. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Moonies. Welcome to the Sailor Moon Fan Club podcast. I'm your host, Victoria L. Johnson, and I'm here with Jeff Trammell, who has worked on several shows, including Infinity Train, The Owl House, Glitch Tex, and Amphibia. He's also the voice actor of Cannonball on Craig of the Creek, and most recently joined as head writer and executive producer of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Super excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the Sailor Moon Fan Club.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for running down this long list of accomplishments. I guess I did that
Yeah.
without realizing.
That's what's like the fun thing whenever I do this. Like I like putting everyone's things because I'm like, you've done so many incredible things. I'm like, people need to know. And I left out stuff.
It's easy to forget them too, because you're just like, oh yeah, I did this thing, and it took like 4 months, and then I moved on to the next thing. So thank you.
No, I totally get that. Whenever I have to like put together like a media kit or my website, I'm like, oh yeah, I did do this thing. Oh yeah, I did do that thing too. Like, how do I fit this on one page?
Too successful.
Yeah. So we will talk a little bit about Spider-Man later, but first, since this is a Sailor Moon Fan Club podcast, I wanted to ask you, what is your first memory of watching Sailor Moon?
I remember watching Sailor Moon when I was maybe like 6. It was used to come on essentially like our this is where I'm like, okay, wait. I grew up in Detroit, so this may have context for people that grew up there. But like our UPN 50 channel 5 or whatever. But yeah, like early morning cartoons. So I would watch it in the morning before I went to school. So like very vividly remember watching that. Um, as well as like watching it on Toonami, like right before Dragon Ball Z, if I recall correctly. So yeah, very much. Those are my early memories watching that show, being like, "Oh, I love this show," but also there's like I'm a kid and there's no quote unquote boy influence. So I guess I like Tuxedo Mask, but also he doesn't do anything. So very early on, we're like, okay, this guy's useless. I guess I like Sailor Mars because I'm very much like red coded. Like I liked Raphael. I like, so those are kind of my. But now with some time away from it, I think I would pick a new favorite if I was given the opportunity.
Okay. I feel like this is good. This makes a lot of sense. I feel like a lot of men like gravitate towards Succeed Mass and then they're like, okay, actually, I want someone with
Yeah,
a little more action. And then I feel like Sailor Jupiter is also another favorite, but definitely Sailor Mars.
that's who my current favorite would be, is Sailor Jupiter.
Yeah.
She's my wife's favorite as well. So I think there's also like a oh, they like she saw a lot of herself in Jupiter because my wife is tall and Jupiter obviously very tall. So that would probably color my viewpoint a bit more now.
I love that. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. She's a great character. She's become one of my favorites in like recent rewatches since doing this podcast. So totally get that. Do you have any favorite episodes or moments from the show? That you remember?
Man, I'm trying to think of what my favorite moment would be. Um, the one that's immediately popping into my head is the one with the like the record producer, or like there's someone who makes music and then everyone kind of gets like pied piper by them, if I recall correctly. But it's been like 30 years just made me feel so old. It's been like 30 years since I watched it. But I remember liking that. And then also, like, if I were to like take a step back and pick a more kind of like community focused moment, I think just constantly seeing people dunk on Tuxedo Mask and be like, I'm here to do this thing. You've done nothing. Goodbye. Like, that to me is so funny how that's become like a part of the zeitgeist. I kind of love that as well.
Yeah, no, that's the best online like running gag. It's like, but you didn't do anything. Oh, great. This like in every instance.
Yeah.
Um, so we did kind of talk about your favorite Sailor Scouts, like it's Sailor Mars. Did you have a reason you like Sailor Mars when you were younger, or was it just like you said, kind of just like the red
I felt
vibe?
like it was, yeah, it was the red, but also I think the attitude, like she felt very fiery, obviously, but also just like kind of blunt, kind of like take no nonsense, which I think really like for me, I'm always the guy who's like, oh, I like this character because they are like so direct, and I'm not that. So I think there's like an aspirational of like, yeah, I would love to tell this person to just shut up, but like I'm too nice. So I'm very much kind of like always drawn to those kind of characters.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I always say that like Sailor Moon's my favorite because she's the one who I feel like the most, but the one I want to be is like Sailor Neptune because she just seems really cool and just like,
Hmm.
seems like she has her life together. And I'm like, that's my aspirational Sailor Scout, but I'm really Sailor Moon.
You're really just running down the street, toast in mouth, tripping over a bush. You're just
Yeah, like naps and video games, that sounds like a great time. Um, I do want to talk about you. So tell me, like, what is a day in the life of a head writer and executive producer? These sound like really, really incredible roles and like important roles. So I'm like, what do you do?
honestly, it varies from day to day. As the head writer, of course, it's like a lot of like plotting out the story, seeing where we can take it for the season, meeting with the writers, kind of discussing various ideas, getting notes from our executives. It's like, oh, maybe we tweak this, or we don't use this character, or we go this route. So it's kind of like it's funny as I was gonna say, it's like a puzzle in a lot of ways because you're trying to like make everything work and fit all these pieces together, but still make something that at the end of the day still works and it's still like fun to kind of like watch and have like a great journey through. But then I was like, maybe I shouldn't use this comparison because I hate puzzles. So, but I love storytelling, so it works out. But yeah, honestly, like a lot of the head writer aspect is that, and I'm doing that in addition to all the EP stuff. So that's going to like meetings for everything, like design meetings, edits, records that are like 4 hour sessions once a week. As well as like, meeting with the crew to discuss any needs or concerns they have. Seeing the board pitches when our storyboard artists take our scripts and then make a storyboard. As well as like I think I mentioned, yeah, like design meetings, character designs, meeting with our overseas vendors. So it's a lot of just like kind of constant meetings, as well as like finding the time to meet with the writers, as well as finding the time to like meet with our execs and show them certain things of like, oh, here's how this animatic is turning out, or even just us getting shots back from overseas, from Polygon Pictures in Tokyo and CGCG in Taipei, and just kind of like watching through the shots and seeing how they interpreted our boards, or being like, oh, actually, this thing doesn't work. So can we tweak this shot? So it's a lot of like kind of quality control, as well as just kind of trying to get eyes on everything, as well as like checking in with the rest of the team, which our team, I think it's around like 80 people right now. So it's kind of like it's a lot of meeting with various people and kind of checking in on things.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm so happy I asked that because there were like half those things I did not know. I was like, you're in a writer's room, but like sitting in on like voice uh sessions, like that makes sense, but it's just something I just wouldn't have thought about. And so thank you for breaking that down
Yeah,
because
of course.
like now I know. You have like a whole thing going on. And I since it's, Spider-Man, this is Sailor Moon podcast, but I'm curious, like, what was your first memory of watching Spider-Man? Like I remember watching the amazing Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and that's like my first introduction, and I love that show so much. And so I'm curious what your first memory of watching or seeing Spider-Man was.
Your first memory of watching Spider-Man was him and Firestar and Iceman?
It was, yeah.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I love that. Um, Mine was the animated series from the 90s. Probably around the same time I saw Sailor Moon and was watching things like TMNT and Power Rangers. Um, yeah, I remember watching Spider-Man, and I think there's a lot of fun with Spider-Man because I think as a kid you're just like, oh, bright colors, like he's very immediately like eye popping because you see him swinging through the city. And I remember watching that series, and that was my introduction to the character. And the first thing you see is like, well, they have that song that is like forever burned into my mind, the like Radioactive Spider Blood theme. But also like that's where I got to see a character like Venom for the first time and be like, oh my god, this is so cool. And even like as a kid, appreciating like the weird technical aspect of like, oh, when he's Venom, there's two voices kind of talking like looped on top of each other. That's really cool. But also like seeing characters like Black Cat and um, that also being like my introduction to the wider Marvel universe. Because Iron Man would pop up, or Daredevil, or Doctor Strange, or so. Honestly, it was like this weird kind of like gateway into a bigger universe. But yeah, that's the first time I saw Spider Man, and like immediately became a fan. I remember like dressing as Spider Man for Halloween one year with the like like the hard plastic shell mask and like the little cloth smock thing that you wear on the front. Um, yeah, so that's my introduction to the character.
I don't know if you did this on purpose, but it's funny that you mentioned kind of seeing Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and Daredevil. And those are the cameos you see with there. Oh.
As I said the last one, I was like, oh yeah, they're all because that was not intentional. That was just like me running on instinct memory. That's so funny.
No, I figured, and I was like, "Oh, look at that!" I feel like things always come back full circle, and so it's just so fun to see. Like you saw these characters, when your first introduction to Spider-Man, and then gets got to bring them back for your own show, and that's just so cool.
Yeah, that's unreal. That's a, yeah. I don't think I'm aware of my subconscious. I think I gotta sit down and really think about this now.
This is secretly a therapy show. Everyone comes back well, away with like some revelation, and it makes me happy every time.
I love it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love this. Yeah, so and funny enough, I think too, to be fair, I was watching Spider-Man the animated series around the same time. So I can't say which one was first, but Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, I remember making like a bigger impression on me. And also like my brother loved Spider-Man growing up, so we actually still call him Spidey to this day. And so it's just so funny. Like he loves Spider-Man. And I haven't talked to him about the show yet either. So I'm like, I need to do that. But
Get him on the call. Get
right, like
him.
send him the link, hop him in, see what he's doing. Uh, I also too like so I was on another podcast a couple of years ago called Enter the Spider Cast, and we talked about similarities between Spider-Man and Sailor Moon, and it's something I never thought about until I was there, thinking about like both of them kind of as reluctant heroes, where they're kind of like they want to do the right thing, but also they're kind of like I just want to hang out with my friends, like I don't want to like have to like save people today, or like oh, I feel this responsibility to save people today, but like this is weighing on me a lot.
Yeah, I'm just a teenager. Yeah, that's a
Right.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious if you've ever like thought through that connection or if there's any other characters who you kind of like, oh yeah, like these kind of like relatable or do you like relatable heroes in general and like reluctant heroes?
Yeah, totally. It's funny because I think that is a thing that's kind of prevalent in teen heroes more than anything. It feels like, you could have those moments with like a Superman, but it usually never really happens. Because there's always like a sense of duty first. And there are for these characters as well, but there's such a sense of like being a teenager and that like FOMO as well, I think is so important. So it's funny because as you mentioned, like both Spidey and Sailor Moon are so similar in that regard, especially because they usually have like a big friend group who but at least in their case it's like, oh, we're all gonna go fight this thing together. But even early on that's not the case for Sailor Moon, so it is kind of like a, oh no, I'm gonna miss out on this big event. um and to a degree, like, depending on what version of Spider-Man you're dealing with, even that's kind of the same case where it's like, oh well, I can go fight crime with my hero friends. uh but yeah, it's a really good point. I think there's also, yeah, I think it's a big, honestly, a big thing of it is that FOMO aspect, but also just like there's so much pressure to be a hero, and it's weirdly aspirational because when you're a kid you're like, oh, I want to be a hero like that, without thinking of all the things that you would miss out on if you were a hero. And just kind of like the normal moments of being a teenager are stressful enough without getting shot at or having to deal with anything else. So I think that's a good barometer for like what it takes to be a hero, because it'd be so easy to just like not. I guess more so for Spidey than Sailor Moon, because like her world will be taken over like every other week by someone. So,
That's fair. Like at least with Spider-Man, it's like, well, you got the Avengers. They might help it.
yeah, I
But
don't need to be there. Tony will show up. Yeah,
Sailor Moon is like, nope, it's just us. Um,
yeah, and it's usually targeted at her or the team anyway. So
that's a good point. They are always coming after the Silver Crystal, but I think you did find a good loophole. It's like you just need your friends to also be superheroes, and then you get to
hmm,
both worlds. Because even like thinking back to Spider-Man, his amazing friends, he kind of like
yeah,
these are my friends now. Now I can hang out with my friends and fight crime. Like perfect world.
that's a, yeah. Honestly, that I love that. Maybe that's it. Maybe go back in time, Spider-Man, find the spider, and just have it bite your friends too. You can all just be a trio or a quartet of spider people.
Right. Like have it bite Mary Jane, never miss
Hmm.
it again.
Yeah.
It's like we're gonna go stop this crime and he'll happen afterwards. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, I'm signing you up for this. You'll thank me later. Here.
That's great. Uh, I saw in another interview too with Crunchyroll that you mentioned anime's influence on Craig of the Creek. Ah.
Hmm.
Was there any influence on your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man from anime?
A ton of it. There's so much. I mean, honestly, like our crew, so many people on it are huge anime fans. Um, so like our board team, especially with throwing little references. Um, there was a version where like where we meet Doc Ock and he's playing that video game. He also used to be like a big K-pop guy, and like there was a version where he we did like a little bit of a short where it was like he was in jail and had Vincent trying to like stand in line to get him like this super rare poster of this K-pop character or this anime character that he really wanted. So very goofy stuff like that, but also like actually within the DNA of the show, there's so much like when it comes to like the fight scenes or just like the way kind of we think about how certain characters with their powers would use them. And then there's a big anime influence in that regard. Yeah, so I say that to say there's a lot of anime influence, but also like our supervising director Mills Wire is like a huge anime guy, huge Gundam guy. So like there's influences from that as well. When I started writing season one, I had just gotten into One Piece, which was a mistake. Not because I love One Piece, but uh, I was like reading that as I was writing this, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a hack. I would never be as good as Oda because Oda's so good." So like, and a lot of doubt was cast on my own talents thanks to Oda.
No, the
But
feeling.
no, yeah, it was also very inspiring to just be like, "Oh, it's incredible how like this thing is set up and it pays off down the line." So even in that regard, like, you know, psychologically, there was a lot of things that I took away from that that I brought to the show that I wanted to kind of like set the seed for, plan out in advance, knowing that one day I'd come back to be able to pay it off.
Yeah, it makes sense. I love that. I feel like as like more of us like 90s kids and like 80s kids are growing up and like getting into the industry, it's like you're seeing just so much more anime influence on works now just because we were all grew up anime heads.
Hmm.
It's really fun to see. Um I also really love the fight between Scorpion and Peter. And I guess spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched it yet. Fast forward like maybe like 5 minutes. But um, where he kind of like is dealing with you know what Norman says about great power and great respect, which I thought was like a nice like play on that like responsibility versus respect and like what that means. And how this like becomes a turning point for Peter. And I'm curious like if you can share like if we could expect more of that moving forward, if we're moving forward, or you can't share that, that's fine too. Or like would you want
Yeah,
in the future?
in regards of Norman's lesson to Peter, or in regards to like the kind of Scorpion Peter fight.
Kind of like Peter wrestling with like that like balance between I guess respect and responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, this is the part where I'm like, what can I say that isn't going to be a spoiler? No, honestly, like there's definitely a lot of room to continue that growth for Peter. I think one thing that I really love with the way season one has been received is that people are seeing that, like, you know, Peter has all this responsibility and power and he wants to make a difference, but it's very easy to see that, like, you know, just having a different mentor can set him down a different path. But at the end of the day, Peter's still Peter, so he's always going to kind of stray right back to where he should be. But that doesn't mean that, like, this will be the only chance to influence him. So I'm really excited about as we move on further things that could pop up that might kind of like cause Peter to stray from that path, even just a little bit, even momentarily, or possibly completely. You know, like anyone who's seen the show knows that like Lonnie Lincoln was very much on one path, and then that path kind of gets changed, and maybe he strays back, maybe he doesn't. But I think there's something very interesting to that, especially with this show, because so much of this show is either a character that you know or a character that you might be unfamiliar with or a new take on a character you know. So I think being able to have those kind of like this is the barometer for where they are, this is kind of how the story goes, and being able to play with that, because play with those expectations and maybe surprise you is, to me, I think one of the biggest strengths of the show. So there's something really cool about, oh, I know this guy is supposed to become this character, but the journey to get there is a little unconventional or not what we've seen before. So yeah, I think, you know, not just with characters surrounding Spider-Man, but with Spider-Man himself, that journey can always kind of go left when it's supposed to go right, which I think is a really cool aspect.
Yeah, no, I agree. A big strength of the show as I was watching where um there's so many characters, obviously like Spider-Man, so many people are familiar with it. So you're like, okay, I know where this is going. I know what happens. Like, and then, you know, things happen and I won't spoil too much. But obviously like even like the last scene of the last episode where you're like, oh, like, okay,
Yeah.
this is all new. I don't know anything actually. Like forget all the like 30 years of history I know about Spider-Man. Nothing is
Yeah.
so it's just really cool and I'm really excited. I also really love like the paneling that's done in the show where this
Hmm.
panel. I'm curious how that came across because that was just a really cool way to kind of like play around with scenes, I thought.
You know what's funny is like our show is so retro coded and so like, you know, Ditko, Lee, Ramita inspired, um, that we were always leaning on those classic looks, but it honestly the panels wasn't a thing until we got to the storyboard. And I think we were like we were doing the kind of like montage of Peter getting ready in the morning. And then one of our storyboard artists, I want to say it might have been Chris Pianca. Um, so if I'm miscrediting someone else, my apologies. But I know when Peter's getting ready, it was like quick cuts. And then I think Chris had the idea to like put them in panels. And it was like, oh, this is perfect because like we can get all this information, but also we don't need to like cut to this, cut to this, cut to this. We get them all up on the same time. And it felt so like it made so much sense. So then from there we were just like leaning into it even more of like, okay, this is a comic book, this is our kind of feel. And then as we evolved even more, we brought on Anthony Castro, who's incredible, and he would do a thing where like he'd put in the panels and then have certain characters cross them. So like when Doctor Strange moves his hand, it crosses the border. Or if James and Maria are fighting Spider-Man, they might pop out of their panels a bit more. And it just allowed us to kind of like play with a lot of fun, like take the trope, but also like spin it and just do really cool things where it feels like it is a comic book that's come to life. And even in episode 10, I won't spoil, but there's a certain character that appears and there's a panel box around them. And then that panel box turns black as they push towards the screen. So just being able to do stuff like that, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I just love things like that where it's just really creative and just like out of the box, but it feels organic to the show as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really fun. Who from the Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man characters would you add to your writer's room? So Nico, Peter, Scorpion, anybody.
Ooh, not Scorpion. I'm trying to, honestly, this is such a tough question because there's part of me that's like, oh, Norman's really smart. I'm like, well, he's gonna usurp me, so probably not Norman.
Very like,
Um,
yeah.
and I'm like, maybe it's just nice to have someone who's like good energy, like Lonnie or Pearl in the room. Um, but the more I think about it, I'm trying to think who would be a natural storyteller as well, but also like not rock the boat too much. Uh, I'm kind of leaning towards Harry. I think I think Harry's fun, but also like would give us some really great areas to mine because he's so just laid back and chill too.
I think that's
Also, I could like try to get him to make it like pay for lunch because I feel like he's like
the point. You get some good lunches, like lobster rolls for everyone today.
yes, or raisins, which he's never had. Or,
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, something even like I don't want to say basic, but yeah.
yeah.
Maybe get some craisins and be like, dude.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah. No, that's a good one because I do feel like you kind of well, yeah. I feel like he's someone who can take a back seat. But also like isn't afraid to speak up. So I feel like
Totally.
that's a really great answer. Thank you for indulging me.
No, thank you for the question. I had a lot of. Now I want to know what's your answer? Who would you have picked?
Hmm. Ooh, who would I pick? I mean, Harry's such a good answer. Um, let's see. Going through. I mean, Lonnie, maybe. I feel like he has some good leadership qualities.
Mm-hmm.
He's good at like rallying people together, where you kind of see him do, on the field and then also when he joins the gang. And so I think he could be good. And he's really smart as we've seen as well. So I'm
Yeah,
sure he'd be a good writer.
Lonnie's a great pick. Yeah,
Thank you.
maybe he'll write a book one day about his journey.
Yes. I will read that. Um, I also did see on your website that you wanted to be a professional wrestler at some point. And we've actually had um then Sasha Banks, but now Mercedes Moné on the show, and so that was really exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Sailor Moon fans, a lot of wrestlers who are Sailor Moon fans. But I wanted to ask you, would you want to be a face or a heel if you ever got to live out your dream of being a wrestler?
I actually did wrestle for a bit on the independent scene when I was a teenager. I was a heel. Um, it's very easy to get people to not like you, and it's a lot harder to get them to like you. So I prefer to be a heel. Uh, yeah, it's also just like very, I think as I mentioned earlier, I'm very much like not the person that's like, hey, you shut up. But as a heel, you get to be. And it's very liberating to just get to go out and yell at strangers. And they're like, yeah, this is fine. And and are like kind of on board for it. So yeah, being a heel is nice because you get to like vent frustrations and then come out of it like, this is great. I mean, my body hurts, but my mind is clear.
That's a mantra to live by. Like, yes, my body's sore, but my mind is sharp and clear. I love that because absolutely. That does sound fun. It's like, oh, I can just let loose and say whatever. And people paid for this. This is great.
Yeah, this is what they want. They love that I'm yelling at them
Yeah,
right now.
that sounds fun, actually. Maybe I think you convinced me on the heel. Um, So clearly you're a Sailor Moon fan, clearly you're a Spider-Man fan. What else do you stand though? I like to ask this question just to show that like we're multifaceted people. We have different interests. So it could be literally anything. Food, it could be Beyonce, it could be anything. Video game.
Hmm. I mean, I'm trying to show that I'm multifaceted, but I've already talked about my love of One Piece. I think I'm gonna continue. I have a bunch of One Piece characters on my body, so I clearly care too much.
Wait.
Um,
Where in One Piece are you actually? I should have asked that.
I caught up.
Yay!
Yeah, I when I started writing, it's funny. I wrote the pilot for Your Friendly Neighborhood in August of 2021, and I started reading One Piece in August of 2021, and I caught up by December because I was reading it because I was like, I can't watch it's too much. So I was like reading it as I was actively doing the show, which was like stupid because there was so much going on, and I would be like, okay, cool, a meeting, send email, clock out for the weekend. Now I'm just reading One Piece the entire weekend. Um, but I love it, and then I caught up, and I'm going to reread it now that I have all this knowledge. And then I got like halfway, like up to the time skip, and I was like, I can't. I'm so tired. I can't keep. So I kind of fell off of rereading it, but I'm still caught up. I'm maybe like maybe like 7 chapters behind right now, but basically caught up.
Nice. Yeah, I'm around the same. I may be like maybe a few more chapters behind, but caught up. But yeah, I watched it and then I caught up to the anime, I think 2 years ago, and then I switched to the manga. And it's such a fun ride. But you're absolutely right. It definitely is like, how does he keep doing this?
Yeah. He can't keep getting away. It's basically because every time you're like, okay, well, eventually, like, there's gonna be a drop off point where it dips, right? And it's like, nope, it's just always good. Even at its like, even at its worst, which I hesitate to say, it's always really good. And like to be that consistently good for like 20 plus years is a, infuriating as a
Yeah,
storyteller. I'm like, how do you do it?
absolutely. I'm just like, ugh, every time, every time. But I guess if you can give me like one music artist you like. Speaking of which, the theme song remix, however you want to call it, amazing. I'm like unskippable every single time. I'm like, I need to listen to it every single episode.
I love it so much. It's what's funny is our end titles were initially our opening titles, which I love our end titles as well. Zach and Leo, our composers, did that, and it's phenomenal. Um, but it very much started out where we were like, okay, can we get, when we were trying to figure out the theme, it was like, can we get this original theme song? And I was like, well, probably not because like, just kind of logistics. So you're like, okay. And then we went another route, and Zach and Leo did this amazing theme. That's actually Peter's theme for the show. Um, and then we heard back and I was like, oh, yeah, we can get these rights. And also, like, Mr. Feige is like, we should use this and we should, like, get a new take on it and everything. So we were able to get that. And it was like, this is so cool. This is super fun. The energy's great. We're going to use this, but we also still have this incredible theme. So we'll make this our end credit theme. And I feel like, honestly, it's the best of both worlds because we get to have both, and both are such like iconic in their own ways, which is so like hard to take something like whether you're remixing it or making something new. It's so hard to like take something so classic and then like find a fun twist on it or find something new that like feels like it pays tribute to the character in a fun way. And I honestly feel both of those themes do so. But to your initial question, of a musician I really like, this is a tough question because there's someone I want to say that's kind of like been my go-to answer for years. I'm trying to see if there's anyone else that's popping in my head. Um, all right. I'm gonna go with Childish Gambino, longtime Gambino fan, since the mid to late mid 2000s, which is also making me feel very old. Um, I've seen him in concert maybe like 5 or 6 times. including what was supposedly his last concert, and I got front row tickets to. And then he was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do more tours." And I was like, "Well, this was a lie. Like, why did I why did I go all out for this?"
Rappers always lie. Actually, everyone always lies.
Yeah,
It's I'm retiring, and then 5 years later, here's another album, and it's like,
yeah. He got me. But yeah, despite that, I would still say Gambino. I just think there's something great about like his early hip hop stuff as well as like his more soulful stuff. He's a really great, like kind of all encompassing artist, which I think is dope.
yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. There are definitely a few songs of his that I've listened to on repeat for a long time. So
Mhm.
I'm with you. I still haven't seen him though. I need to fix that. I need to see him in person.
You'll have a long time to do so because he'll never retire apparently. So I think
I'll catch him sometime in the next 10 years.
Mhm.
And what advice do you have for anyone who may want to become or wants to become a head writer or executive producer as you are right now?
um, excuse me. Honestly, I would say like just kind of. I know this is like not the answer anyone wants to hear, but just kind of like honestly keep at it. It's hard to kind of give advice for how to get here because I never anticipated getting here. Like I'm a self-taught writer. I didn't go to college for this. I just kind of was like one day I discovered like television writing was a thing. I was like I want to write. I downloaded a bunch of books and scripts and kind of taught myself how to write. And then I found out about this thing called the Nickelodeon writing program that Nickelodeon does, where you can submit a script. They do it every year, and a bunch of people read through and judge all these scripts, and then they move you to the various stages. And if you become a finalist and win a spot, they pay you to like fly you out to LA. You work at Nickelodeon for a year, and they pay you to learn, which is like insane to me. It's the coolest thing in the world. So I applied for that. Excuse me, and was like, okay, I was working at a plant at the time in Detroit as security. So like the furthest thing from writing for TV. Applied for that, got in, moved out here in 2015, worked at Nickelodeon for a year, did freelance on Harvey Beaks and Glitch Text, finished up the year, finished the program, didn't get a job out of it, which is kind of like floating, looking for work. And 6 months later ended up on Crack of the Creek, and that was kind of the beginning of my rise. I was a staff writer for season one, got promoted to head writer for season two, uh, supervising producer for season four, and then jumped over to Marvel um, back in 2021 to show run Spider-Man, which is like crazy to me. So I never had like aspirations to be a showrunner. I was always just happy, like, okay, I'll work on, other people's shows and maybe one day I'll get to that spot. And it happened honestly, like within like 5 years of me becoming a writer, which is insane. But like I had to be in the right place at the right time, but also have those skills to back up those opportunities that I was given. So honestly, it's just being open to things, being ready. When I finished up at Nickelodeon, I was like devastated. I didn't have anything lined up. But had I had something lined up, I wouldn't have been available for Crack of the Creek. So sometimes certain opportunities, only happen if you're in the right place at the right time. So very fortunate for that and everything that's kind of gotten me here. But again, I say all that to say that like there's no way I could have planned for this. There's no way I was like, I'm gonna set out and show run a Spider-Man series at Marvel. So it was just kind of like being open to certain things and seeing where they led me. Because even at Marvel, I didn't come in to pitch for Spider-Man. I came in to pitch for another project. And then they picked someone else for that. And then they were like, but we want you to do Spider-Man. So who, like honestly, it's kind of crazy.
That really is. And I feel like that's a consistent thing I hear where it's like there's no one path. It's not like you do this, and that, and then you get here. It's really like being passionate, being ready, having the skills. And that's really great to hear because I'm also a self-taught creative writer, and so that's really encouraging for me personally as someone who also read Oda. And, and so I appreciate that,
Of
hearing that as
course.
well, because I think you hear like people with MFAs and you're like, oh, I don't have that. Can I do this? And it's like you can.
Hmm.
Have to, you know, be resourceful and stuff.
Totally.
That's cool. And then what is next for you and where can people find you?
What's next for me is at least two more seasons of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which was announced by our wonderful head of streaming, Brad Winderbaum. So I didn't get in trouble; he said it.
Yay!
Yes, thank you. So at least two more seasons of Spidey, hopefully even more, because I love that character and this world we've built, and I want to dig into those journeys for many years to come. But in addition to that, you can find me on Instagram and Blue Sky and probably some other place that I'm not going to name. I'm at Mr. Jeff Trammell, uh, two F's, two M's, two L's. Um, yeah, so I'm on all those places, and I'll, as I can, I'll be releasing more info about the show just to kind of like remind people, like, hey, this is when season two is coming out once we have a date, and so on and so forth. So if you're interested in that, or just any random wrestling or One Piece tweets or posts. I shouldn't have said tweets. Posts I do. That's where you can find them.
It's okay. I still say tweets too because it's forever tweets. Um,
Yeah.
or
Yes.
if you're on Blue. But yeah, so I will drop all of that in the episode description for anyone listening, including the websites we will not name.
Yep.
And you can also find me at Miss Old School on, I'm going to say Twitter, and Instagram. Also on TikTok at Sailor Victoria. And you can catch the podcast at Moonies Club on Twitter and Instagram. And we have merch at mooniesclub.com if you want to check that out as well. So thanks all for listening. And thank you, Jeff, for coming on the Sailor Moon Fan Club podcast.
Thank you for having me.